Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is currently Tuesday, November 15th, 2011, and this is Day 9 Daily number 378, and it is a beautiful day. It is Tuesday. Sadly, there is no state of the game this week, but there is going to be MLG Providence this weekend, and I won't be there. Ha! Boom! Look at me so casually, leisurely reclining in my chair. I ain't going to be there. In fact, I'm going to be at a wedding, and you thought casting non-stop with a $100,000 prize pool on the line was stressful? Well, try doing a best man speech. That is going to be what I'm up to. So in fact, when I depart on Friday morning, this Friday, you will not see me again until around the 1st of December. Where will I be? In Sweden. I'm doing DreamHack again, fellas and ladies. In that order. Yes, that's right. I'm going to be up in Jönköping, Sweden, where I will be providing a little bit of coverage of the SC2 action. And oh, it's going to be good. For some reason, DreamHack just keeps building bigger and bigger and bigger stages every year. And I will never complain because that's awesome. Trying to think if there's anything else I need to announce. Anything else notable, noteworthy. I don't think anyone cares. Great. Fun Day Monday for whenever I return is submit to me a game of you having the worst partner of all time in a team game. It could be 2v2, it could be a 4v4, as long as it's awful. That's what we're looking for. And the wonderful Fun Day Monday admins will take care of that. In a particularly exciting news, today was a day where, for some reason, the to-do list was unable to shrink at all. So my daily prep time was under 2 hours. I hate it when that happens. It's always like at least 2 hours to get something good looking, to get something pretty. So what you are about to see, I streamed my preparations live. I even did things like show a coveted notepad file. Look at this. We can instantly just get a glimpse. Whoa! Of some of the notes that I have written down. Today's topic is going to be all about meching Terran. Mech is a style that's fun to do because so often people just sort of get stuck building Marines, and then one day, when everything seems to be going so well, you run into some burrowed banelings and you don't want to build Marines anymore. Marine Marauder can feel particularly fragile. It is. If you can micro really well, if you're someone like Startail's Bomber, then of course you can just easily, micro Marines perfectly. But you always want that alternative, and Mech seems to be the most reasonable one out there. But the big issue, of course, is that Mech can have a certain number of problems. Let's actually come into this game of Goody right now and take a look at exactly what sort of stuff we're talking about. So I'm sure, whoa, easy there, volume tab. I'm sure that you have hit this situation before, or actually let's go to the Goody cam, where things look good. I mean, you have a decent amount of factories up. You have your armory, it's getting your upgrades. Cool, you got an engineering base, you can build some missile turrets, you even have your third base up and running. Let's go through some of the strains and stresses that you will encounter, no doubt, in your journeys. Also, I completely messed up all the drivers on my computer, so I'm hoping that we get to see some really amazing graphical glitches throughout the daily today. So this is probably the way that Mech looks and feels for a lot of you. In particular, come check out the minimap with me. Yeah, what do you see? No vision of frickin' anything. You just cannot see. You try to move out, you get pinched off. You try to move out with another Hellion, well, maybe you'll spot some stuff, maybe you won't. But for the most part, you are playing in the dark. You are playing with your pants down. Or maybe not with your pants down, but you're playing with pants that have absolutely no clairvoyance to them in the slightest. You're building up your big scary death army, and then when you move out, what happens? Ooh, you get, oh, that's right, you get counterattacked, yeah. First thing that I know a lot of meching players deal with all the time is this stuff, where it feels like they can never ever leave their base. Again, if we direct ourselves to that lovely, wubulous, wonderful minimap, we can clearly see that Goody is unable to do much at all. Yeah, and these counterattacks sort of continue happening. And then what happens in your games? You get this glimmer of hope. Things start to really start lining up. Life's going well. You're moving down, you're picking off expansions, you're spotting expansions. And then all of a sudden he just has this gigantic ass army, and in particular he has broodlords flapping their way forward. And this is something that I see and feel often with Mech. This sort of inability to do much. We sit passively, try to build up our army of doom, and then when we move out, we get counter army of doom, and then we drop dead. Doesn't sound like a very fun life for meching Terran players at all. And I show that game because Goody is known for meching very well, but even he struggles with these sorts of things. I want all you Terran players out there at least have that familiarity. Even if you've never mech'd before, I want you to look at this game in your memory banks and say, oh yeah, wow, that totally happened to me. Boom. Now, the thing that a lot of Terran players have begun to note, such as Goody, is that there needs to be a lot of good ways to put aggression on the Zerg all the time. And interestingly, the inspiration that I want to introduce you to was not a meching game at all. This is just a general Terran vs. Zerg between MVP and Nest-T. So what we saw in the Goody game was lots of passivity, lots of passivity. Oh, well, I can't move out. I don't quite have the right units. I need to get the Thors for the Mutalisks. I need to get the tanks up so that way I can do all sorts of good fancy damage and all that. I need to be able to do good fancy damage to his Mutalisks and tanks for the Roaches and Hellions for the Zerglings, and you don't really ever have the right mix, it feels, until you get big. Well, I want you to come to this game and notice this little counterintuitive attack that MVP does. I thought this was quite lovely. This was casted live at BlizzCon. I loved this so much. Now what I'm going to do is talk about traditional Terran vs. Zerg logic in this circumstance and contrast that with sexy new school logic that we're going to be employing. Let's go to the MVP cam. Alright, let's times 8 it, which no doubt is going to cause some degree of lag for any of you because my encoder just can't quite handle the heat. So MVP is going to do some traditional aggression. Move out with the Marines. Try to pick off overlords. Scout the enemy. The factory is going to come up and we're going to have the reactor popping up right now. Now we are going to go for double Hellion play. We're going to give this factory to the reactor and produce Hellions 2 at a time. At this point in time, what many players do is get this fast tech lab out and then boom, they will start the stim pack upgrade, which we see basically we have nearly enough money to do. MVP is going to do a variant that is considered the passive variant of this matchup. And again, Mech, very passive. The whole strategy seems passive in its own right. He's going to be getting tanks and Marines. Now, let me just point out, why would we feel that this is a passive variant? Why would that instinctively feel true? Well, if we come back and just look, my poor little Marines, they can't get stim, they can't get combat shield, because we have no tech lab barracks. Sure, we can begin building up a lot of tanks early on, and what I would say, if I were doing a typical analysis, is I would say, man, MVP is going to be way strong later. He's going to have a ton of tanks coming up. Yeah, it's going to be really, really, really good. But he's going to have to wait for, I don't know, maybe he'll build 2 barracks so he can get stim and combat shield out of those 2 tech labs simultaneously. But watch a couple of just general themes that happen. We see MVP identifies his opponent going for some sort of long-term play, playing somewhat defensively. He sees that his opponent cannot move out. Sure, we're getting 2 more barracks to get Marines. There's nothing too exceptional or noteworthy there. We have great control over the map positioning right now. And here comes MVP, getting ready to make his way to move on out. Wow, wait, he's at the 8-minute and 30-second mark. Why is this a good timing to move out? Well, I mean, MVP is essentially saying, I have tanks that are great against Roaches, Hellions that are pretty damn great against Zerglings, not phenomenal, but quite good. Marines are just generally good against everything. This is a very hidden attack timing. At most, we're going to be up against a lot of speed Zerglings. At worst, he's going to have a substantial amount of Roaches for us to deal with. Or even in this circumstance, we see MVP carefully positioning himself around here. He doesn't quite have the siege mode yet. But look at this weird attack timing. There's nothing upgrade special about this. Just instead we're hitting the Zerg very early on with a nice crisply timed attack. It has more to do with the Zerg's inability to have really had anything to do with the layer yet. There's no Mutalisks, there's no Infestors up. I mean, this is weird of me to say, but there's no Hydras. Hydras will actually do a good amount of damage to a push like this if you have them up, but your opponent just literally can't at 8 minutes and 30 seconds. The worst thing you're going to be up against is a bunch of roaches. And even so, we're going to see MVP take it nice and slow. Meanwhile, back home, that key upgrade not quite coming up yet. No stim, no combat shield, just making sure that we can continue to throw out a lot of Marines. No gas geysers on these expansions, or at the expand. And look at them, carefully remaining positioned by the siege tanks. So now let's hastily go through the remainder of the game, because I think we can clearly see that MVP's in a good position, and I don't want to be necessarily cruel and end the game before you know the results. I want to give you the satisfaction of seeing MVP slowly crawl his way up. I think that this is one of the most revealing moments in the whole game. I will even GoTv style zoom in. He has a bunker, and what does he do? He builds another bunker touching it. He doesn't build another bunker here. He's not trying to be fast. He's being slow and steady. And very carefully allowing himself to take almost no damage. Look at that beautiful units lost tab. Is that not the hottest thing you've ever seen? I mean, maybe some of you, I don't know, are big fans of Megan Fox, and you were giddy during Transformers. This makes me giddy. Megan Fox, I cared little for your voluptuous lips. That is absolutely arousing. Now, what I want you to do is notice this moment in gameplay and think about what it means. That there's this timing for Zerg early on where for some big muscular attacks, they're quite weak. This is something that happens often, like super often, that people will look at this moment, and they will say, yeah, if I open up with a reactor barracks and a tech lab factory, then I can push in some circumstances. But what I want you instead to do is, instead to just look at this attack, I want you to look at this beautiful freaking attack and say, can I just make this happen? Maybe I can just get a bunch of Hellions and Zerglings and sort of swing all those in. Hellions and Zerglings. Maybe I can get a bunch of Hellions and Marines and swing those in early. Maybe I can do some sort of pressure to my opponent that is similar to this attack. And this is what we see Goody starting to do a lot. In the last 6 months, we've seen Goody, who, you know, traditionally is your standard meching player. You know, he builds a lot of tanks and Hellions and Thors, and easy peasy, he attacks with a huge, seemingly indestructible army. Well, the opening is where Goody has started to do a lot of crazy timing attacks. He's done some Reaper stuff, some weird Blue Flame Hellion drop, Banshee stuff, all that's good. But in particular, what I want to look at is this direct push at the front. We will be going to a brief break in a moment just to get a look at that perfect game. I wasn't expecting part 1 to go quite so shortly, but I guess that's what happens when you rush preparation. I would be delighted to take any questions that people have at this point in time, or just general, painful concerns that you have been having while doing Mech, just so we can talk a little bit about those, because I don't want to jip people and just do a 15-minute part 1. Don't want to do that. So again, what I want to try to emphasize is that we've taken this passive style of Mech and we're going to infuse some aggression into it. But that doesn't mean that it's always going to link up nicely. So in parts 2 and 3, we're going to introduce a beautiful game. Then we're going to introduce some kind of concerning type games. Let's go ahead and see. Let's kind of see what some of these questions are. Here's a great question from the Valkyrie. When is it a good time to get Thors? 2 bases, 3 bases, something like that? Thors are a weird unit because they serve 2 purposes in a mech army. This is actually the perfect question to sort of zone out on. Thors are good for 2 reasons. 1, my opponent has mutilisks, or in general, my opponent has any kind of air. I need to get that Thor up so that way I can deal with them. You see this a lot. A meching player will always eventually have some kind of armory back home at base, so that way he can begin the Thor production if he needs be, but he'll always kind of preempt it. Because it's not like if you're going Marine Medevac, where you have a ton of Marines to deal with the Mutilisks already, and the Thors are there to bolster. You need to get those Thors up for the Mutilisks. But the second big reason that we see MVP do a lot is that Thors are good for being aggressive. They allow you to start to be aggressive because they're mobile. Tanks will give you the muscle. I mean, if you have 10 tanks, you're hard to really even approach your Zerg buddy, can't really do that. But it's kind of hard to move forward quickly because the siege tanks have to bolt themselves to the fucking ground. So the Thors really allow you to do that. And we see MVP doing that quite a bit when he mechs. We're not going to show this game, but I recommend you go to blizzcon.com, go to their tournament page, and download MVP versus, MVP versus Nestea on Antigua Shipyard. It's one of the games from the finals. They played 2 games on Antigua Shipyard, and in one of them, MVP went mech, and he got like 3 or 4 tanks, and then all the rest Thors. This allowed him to defend against the Mutalisks, and then move out rapidly, knowing that he could deal with any number of mutas and any number of roaches. That's particularly strong to do if your opponent is going a little bit Mutalisk crazy. So for now, we're going to go ahead and take a brief break, and when we come back, we're going to look at a beautifully executed opening from Goody that is both aggressive and exploits this kind of attack timing to deal damage to the Zerg. And then after that, we're going to look at variations of when things can go wrong and how mech can sometimes be confusing and we cannot quite think properly of how to repair it. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere. Part number 2 right after this.